Good morning, everybody. My name is Sean Carlson. I am Blackjack 98 Enterprises. Today's date is Thursday, October 3rd at 9:55 p.m. in the morning. The project that you see behind me is what I'm going to be working on next. I was just handed this from my neighbor who was a gardener, who is a gardener. He's retired now. He gave this to me so that I can use that to work on and blah, 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 get it running. So, what we're going to do is we're going to look at it and talk about it. Let me turn my camera around. Okay, so what do we have here? Oh, you know, my camera's a bit foggy. Let me fix that up. Here we go. Oh, it's a Mac GHT-17 by McColluch. I have only seen 3 videos about this. And one of the guys who actually took this apart was smoking right near a gas tank. I would not trust that guy with my life for any reason. But what we're going to do with this machine is exactly what we do with all the others. Complete, tear down, and rebuild, which also includes this cutter attachment. I know nothing about this trimmer except for the fact that I have done one before, but it was a still. It had a still weed whacker engine attached to a hedge trimmer body, which is not a big deal for still, but this one's going to be just a little bit different. It takes, if you look at the gas cap, it takes 40-to-1 gasoline and oil. And when I read the user's manual, which is exactly what you should do, user's manual says that you should use regular gasoline and does not exactly specify which gasoline or which oil to mix this with. So, everybody, what we're going to do is we're going to get started. And by the looks of it, I'm going to use a T25 to take off this cover. So let's work on that. The cover is off. This is what it looks like on the other side. Those 2 screws are right there, and they are coarse threads. The reason why they're coarse threads is because you're holding one plastic part to another plastic part. Therefore, that's why they're coarse threads. Fine threads attach directly to the body of the engine. Now, if we were to take this out and look at it, you can see that it's not too bad, but what we could do is we could soak this in some solution, and then we could wash this out, rinse it out, blah, blah, blah. What we also do is we clean everything as we go along. So this will be dipped into a bucket full of water, which is that right there. That is soap and water, and it will soak and everything will clean up. Okay. Now, it looks like I need some nuts and bolts. And what do you know? Just by looking at it. Right here is a whole bunch of washers. If you look at the other one, this is original. This one is not original. I don't even know why this is there. But you know what? Maybe we can clean that up a bit and make that look just a little bit different. So, before we take this off, I'm going to analyze taking this off. So, let's see here. Looks like there's a screw there. 1, 2, 3. Is that it? Is it just those 3? Yes, it's just those 3. So I'm going to use my T25 to take them out. Ooh, I need a smaller one. You know what? I might just use a flathead. Okay, so this is loose, but the screws are right here. And if you look at them carefully, they are fine threads, not the coarse threads that I just took out. Whenever you see fine threads, there's 2 things that are possible. These are attached directly to the engine block, or there is a nut on the other side. So let's take this, and because it's attached to the rewind, the rewind will be attached to the underside of this. Ooh, but let's look at this first. Let's get the other screw out. Okay, so there we go. And this is pretty good. It looks awesome. Doesn't look too bad for cleanliness. Let's look at this, test the resistance. You know what? It's just a little bit greasy. This does have a little bit of difficulty pulling. It might need to be greased up on the inside, so but that's fine. We'll take this apart too. So we'll just set this aside, and we're going to look at the engine now. Now we got a full view of the engine, and as I just predicted, that's where those 3 screws come off. They're attached to the block. Not necessarily the block, but the around the rewind. And when I spin this, this is normally attached, the rewind is normally attached to the crankshaft, which is attached to the piston and the cylinder. If you can spin this a full 360 and have no problems, that means we have an unseized engine, meaning the piston is not stuck to the cylinder, the crankshaft is not stuck in any way, there's no debris in there preventing it from turning like this. The crankshaft is free, therefore the piston is moving back and forth, which means nothing is seized in the engine. It turns over, okay? And it does feel like it has compression. We could have done a compression test before we take it apart, but we're going to do it after. We're going to do a compression test. We're going to test for spark. Okay? So, well, you know what? Now that I think about it, let me look at something here. Yes, we can check for spark and compression as it is. What I'm going to do is use a drill to take this in, and I'm going to spin it this way with a drill. Spinning it with a drill will be a lot more consistent to get a longer spark and a longer compression rating. You know what? Let's do that right now. But before we do, let's continue analyzing the carburetor. This is a Zama carburetor, which means this is an original carburetor. If there was no name anywhere on the carburetor, that would mean it's a cheap Chinese knockoff, which can work. Now, as we can tell, there's 2 fuel lines here. 2 fuel lines means one is hooked up to the air filter and the other is hooked up to the return. There's only 2 fuel lines, but guess what I see? The primer bulb. There is a separate primer bulb from the carburetor. Some carburetors have the primer bulb attached. This one has it separate. So guess what that tells me if it's separate? There's not 2 fuel lines. There's 3. This one, these 2 which are attached to this, and there's 2 more which are attached to this around the back. And I can tell if I was to look back there. Yes, there is. I don't see. Yes, I do. I do see. So there's 3 fuel lines, and we're going to go over that because a lot of you are going to scratch your heads. Where the hell do I put those fuel lines? We're going to do a diagram. I'm going to draw you guys a picture just so you know. We have an on-off switch right here. We don't know if that works, and it feels stuck. Holy shit! That feels stuck. We gotta loosen that up. There's 2 wires that are coming from the stop switch to the ignition, the magneto. And if we were to follow it, it would be underneath somewhere. Okay, so it disappears right into there. But that's where the magneto is. Anything else about this? So let's look at the muffler. Muffler looks like it could be cleaned up a little bit, so maybe there is a spark arrestor screen on there. I don't know. I don't even know the age of this thing, so we're going to figure that out. We're going to clean this up, get all the rust off, clean the inside of it too. Okay, so that's it for the engine components as far as I can tell you. This is a vertical crankshaft, horizontal piston. Okay, let's get our tools out. We have a spark plug checker hooked up. So one end is hooked up directly to the spark plug. The other end is hooked up to the boot, the original boot. And I provided a black background so you can see the spark better. What we have here is a 13mm drill bit, which is going to go right to there. When you do this test, always make sure that your switch is in the start position. So this here is stop, this here is start. You can tell by the arrows are pointing down for stop. Okay, so I'm going to put the phone right up to here, and we're going to turn it. Here we go. I seen a red flash coming from here, so therefore, yes, we do have spark. Okay, good. That's done. Now we're going to take a compression test. Compression tester is hooked up. We have a 16mm socket, and let's look at the spark plug that was in it. Don't know if you can see it, but there we go. It was kind of crusty, corroded all to hell. What we'll do is we'll test it to see if this actually does produce spark. Even though we did a spark plug checker attached to this, does not necessarily mean that this produces spark, and you'll see that. So right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit it again, and we're going to watch this go up. Here we go. Oh wow, look at that, everybody. This has a consistent 120 psi, and the needle is not going down. So it's holding air, it's holding compression, which is good. So now we're going to release it. So after doing that, now we know that this could produce spark, it does produce spark, and it holds compression. So that also tells me that there's nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with the cylinder or the piston. Okay? So let me take this out. What we're going to do now is we're going to take off these two nuts. Before I do, I'm going to let you all know those two nuts are holding this plastic piece against the carburetor, which in turn are also holding this carburetor against this plastic housing on the other side of it. Those two bolts, which those nuts are attached to, are actually on the inside of this plastic housing. Okay? And you see that a bolt right there? That bolt, there's two of them, which are holding this plastic housing to the engine block. So, fine threads because of the nut and the bolt, and those will be fine threads too because they're attached to the engine. So, because those two are two different, the smaller one is 5/16, and the other one is 3/8. The 5/16 one goes onto this one, which does absolutely nothing. I might need to order parts, which is not a big deal because this is now my property. I can do that at my own expense. Okay, enough fooling with that. I'm going to take this head off here. Grip. Oh, whatever you do, never take anything off with a son of a bitchin' drill. You could strip the threads. You could strip the internal threads. You could even ruin the plastic housing and over tighten something a little too quickly, or you could sever the head of the nut or the bolt. Okay, so this is off. Let's look at the other side. When you look at the carburetor and this part here, there is no gasket. There could be a gasket, but there is not. And when we looked at this originally, this part stuck out from the original nut probably about 1/8 of an inch. If we were to put a gasket on this face here, that much sticking out would only stick out maybe about under 1/8. Okay, now the throttle, which is right here, works. See how nicely it works? I barely had to press it. It's got a throttle lock on it. You press this down, throttle works. Okay, so we have to disconnect the throttle line, the throttle linkage, the throttle cable, however you would like to call it. And I can't do everything with one hand. Now the carburetor will be attached to this fuel line and this fuel line. Okay, so let's take that out. And we're just going to set it aside right there, but let's look at it. It's a Zama carb. The numbers are normally right there, which you probably cannot see. There's also numbers in there as well. Oh, look at that. It was made in Hong Kong. So we'll look at the carburetor in greater detail later. But where it came from is right here. So I want to show everybody something very specific. Let me get a pointer stick. Okay. That is a hole which you need to pay attention to. This gasket right here cannot have any holes in it. If this gasket is worn out or there's cracks or it's deformed in any way, it needs to be replaced. Because of the fact that this gasket is between the carburetor and the housing, or this part here, this needs to ensure that it's tight, airtight, otherwise you're going to have trouble adjusting the carburetor. Okay, so we're going to take this out very carefully, and you see there's 4 holes on it, so it can be flipped around upside down or whatever, and it needs to match up with that hole there. That hole there, it gets feeds the carburetor with the air atmospheric pressure from inside the cylinder. Okay, now we can go ahead and take this part off right here, but be mindful of this. You can actually slip the cable out just like that. Okay, now this piece can come out, and I'm going to show you that piece. Those 2 screws are now out, and they are sitting right here. They are fine threads, as I had expected. Upon looking further at this gasket is in great condition. There's nothing wrong with it. If I needed to replace this gasket, I can go buy one, or I can buy the same material, which is right here. I can trace this out, cut that piece out, then put it back on. But now that this is loose, don't force it off. Give it a couple nice taps. Make sure it's loose. Okay. Give it a slight pry. Slight pry. Don't force anything off if it doesn't want to go. If she says no, she means no. Otherwise, give her 20 bucks. It's kind of glued right on there by the feel of it. Okay. Just gonna keep tapping at it. There's a gasket material right there. Make sure you don't break that. There we go. I can feel it loosening just a little bit. The reason why I am being very careful is because of this gasket material here. I don't want to rip or tear this gasket, otherwise I might have to put a new one on or replace it. That gasket right here is a heat shield. It absorbs heat because this plastic piece would be against the hot cylinder. So there we go. But if we did rip it, we can repair it with the same material that I just showed you. Okay. And it looks like it is glued on there. Oh, looks like I am gonna need to replace it. Not a big deal. Somebody glued it onto there. Okay, it's off. So yeah, you gotta replace it. Just so everybody knows, this also needs to have an airtight seal, and the person who put this on here probably glued it on both sides to ensure that there was an airtight seal. Okay, this is an original manufactured part, and it's made out of paper. So paper means air can get in, even into the thickness of the gasket, and cause problems with proper tuning of your carburetor. But that's okay. I'm gonna have to shred this off, rip it off, and trace it out and put a new one on. But let's look at this part here. Those 2 bolts can come out just like this. See that? The heads of the bolts look like this. They're like half moons. Okay, and they're fine threads because of those 2 nuts. But make sure that the actually, you know what? I don't need to make sure they're interchangeable by the looks of it. Okay, this hole right here is very important. If you get a gasket like this that has one hole, make sure that it lines up correctly. Okay, that hole being covered up could be one of the main reasons why your carburetor is not starting, because there's no proper airflow. Put that right into there. Okay, now we're going to take off the muffler. The muffler is held in by two nuts, which are 5/16. Okay, those come off carefully. They're very distinguishable against all the other nuts because they're rusted all to hell and they're burned all to hell. Meaning that they could go no place else but the muffler because they got heavy corrosion on them. Now, once again, this might be glued onto there, we don't know. So we're just going to take it off gently. And give it a few taps. And what do you know? This part here just slipped off. What do you know? Cool. Okay, I would expect a lot of grease and oil probably in this vicinity if there was any. Also in this area too. Okay. This heat shield protects the muffler and the gasket in there from the cylinder. So once again, we're just going to slightly pry everything off. Slightly. Don't force it off. There we go. Don't force it off. If she says no, she means no, but give her $20 and she might say yes. Be careful of this gasket. Oh, looks like, ooh, kind of crumbling. I would expect it to crumble because of the heat. The heat from constant use near the hottest part of the cylinder will cause this to crumble. So yeah, we will have to replace that with heat-resistant material. Okay, now this part can come off. The heat shield. Oh, yeah. This is metal, by the way. And there we go. So, ladies and gentlemen, we can now look at the cylinder. So, looking through the muffler port, we are able to see the top of the cylinder. And I don't know if you can see it through the camera, but there's slight crap on the top of the cylinder or piston. When you look at the ring right there, there's nothing wrong with the ring, and I'm looking at the walls, if you can see it. The walls of the piston are pretty good on this side. Now let's flip it over and look at the carburetor side. On the carburetor side, you will never be able to see the top of the piston. You'll see the bottom of the ring, but never the top of the piston, but you are able to see the bottom of the piston. And when you look at the bottom of the piston, you can see the walls of the cylinder. So if you can see that, this is the walls going right up to the rings, and the walls of the piston look pretty good. So we had 120 psi, we had spark, therefore, like I said before, this is a good engine. Don't necessarily need to take the piston out. So now let's take everything else apart. The carburetor has been removed. Whenever you're dealing with fuel lines, always pinch them off, exactly as I have seen here. What I will say, these fuel lines are new. They are not original. Somebody else has worked on this before, and they put these in as a replacement. Okay? Now, let's look at the carburetor. We already established that it's a Zama. Normally on certain carburetors, the numbers are stamped or written, engraved, etched, whatever onto this side. But they're not. They are written on this side. Right here. Okay, so not the end that is facing the cylinder or attached to the cylinder, but the one that is attached to the air filter housing. And we have M3244P from Zama, and it is a C1U. Okay? This is a choke. This is a carburetor attached choke. And I want to tell everybody something very specific. It has preset snaps on it. So this is run, this is half choke, this is full choke. It snaps into half choke right there. That's half choke. And this here snaps into run. Okay? This other side is the throttle valve, which is attached to the throttle cable, which is that part right there. This opens and closes this everything. Just like that. So let me open this. That's wide open. First, it's on run position for the choke. Throttle is wide open. You should see daylight on the other side. Good. So we're going to look at this a little bit more carefully. We're just going to put it aside. Now we're going to look at the rest of this. I get this idea. We can take the entire engine right off that plastic housing. And if I was to look as to how exactly to do that, I see, if I was to look on the bottom, can I look in the bottom? Yes. Yes. I get this feeling if I take these far out, this blade comes off. And if I take those two out, it just, from the engine, also those springs there, which are holding it together. There's 4 of them on either side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off those springs first and see if it comes off. Okay, those 4 that were holding in attached to the spring are right here. As you can see, they are fine threads and they are all the same size. They were attached to that little metal thing and on it that looks like a square nut right there. So I think we can take this out, but be mindful the wiring is still attached to the on-off switch. Can't really necessarily get into there too much to get it out. And yeah, we gotta take the blade off or this guard cover off. So let's take this guard cover off. The guard cover comes off of 2 coarse thread bolts, which are these here. Okay, one there, one there. Let's get this thing off. That's taken care of. It was attached right there. Fine threads, as previously mentioned. Okay, see that wire that's attached? We gotta get rid of that. I gotta find out where the hell that's connected. And that is just a... Does that slip on? Yes, it does. It just slips right on there. I should be able to pull that right out. Hold on. Get some pliers. Okay, everything is disconnected. This cannot come out. That is right there. It goes there. These here can go into a pile. Look at these here pieces. Okay. So we've got the engine and the housing. We're going to put the housing over there. We're going to put the engine right here. These 2 things, we will find out where they go later. I'm pretty sure I know where they came from. So, now what we can do is we can take off, look on the bottom, and take these off with a flat head. And I'm expecting them to be fine threads because they're attached to the block on the underneath. So I'll show you that. Okay, so the screws came off and they were not fine threads, they're coarse threads, as I was surprised to see. So now that this is off, we can put that right there. We're going to flip it over and look at it. Wow, we got pieces. Okay, we'll look at that just a little bit later. But we have the gears in the transmission. So these screws can go back into right here. I usually put everything back like that, just so that way I don't lose them. I know exactly where they go. Sometimes I just pile everything into my container, but I don't need to do that in this case. What we will do is with this gearbox is we will take all the gears out and we will grease everything individually and we will re-grease it. And so if you're confused and intimidated by all of this, take a picture and then remove everything. Okay, so yeah, hold on. This gear came out really nicely. It just lifted right out. But be careful of its orientation, okay? We're gonna look at it just a little bit more clearly and we're gonna clean the grease off to look at it more clearly. Now to take this off, you got 4 bolts. 2 on both sides of that. Just one there, one there. There's nothing on this side here. But this little pin right here I'm worried about. It may just be a pin, it may be nothing at all. I don't know. There's no slot head on it, there's no nothing on it. I'm thinking maybe it'll just slip out. So, I'm going to take these out and see how well it comes off. Okay, so those 2 bolts that came out were coarse threads, and there were these 2. The ones that were attached to here are these 2. They're small. Okay, so be mindful of those. Remember, coarse threads, attach 2 plastic pieces together. Fine threads, always attached to a nut or the actual engine. Now, I've got to slip this off somehow. I forgot about those 2 right there, which I did not see. There's 2 more that got to get taken out, which are deep inside there. Okay, so we got 2 fine threads, 2 coarse, 2 fine, which are 2 fine, which are those deep ones, 2 coarse, and 2 fine right here. Okay, now this can somewhat come off, which it looks like it is, just like that. I'm gonna put it right here, and now we got full access to the engine. So let's look at the bottom of this very carefully. There's a clutch. Clutch looks like it could be cleaned up just a little bit. And that clutch is directly attached to that gear right there. Let's put this aside. And that clutch fits into this area here. Those are the 2 shoes. When this flywheel is turning, those 2 shoes expand and grab the clutch and turn it. Okay, now we can have full access to the magneto, the ignition coil, the wiring, the flywheel. So yes, let's look at it. Everything's going to be cleaned up, nice and spick and span. So we'll take the magneto off with those 2 right there, okay? And then we will take off the shoes and the flywheel. Magneto is out. This is what it looks like, top and the bottom. It looks like there's a sticker on there, which means this had been replaced since it was originally bought. Okay, that's what we're looking at. Put that aside. Now we got the engine completely taken down right to its bare components. If you don't want to put these into a container there, you can put them right back to where exactly it is that you found them. Just screw them in a little bit, like I did there, like I did there, and there. Okay? Now, let's look at the engine itself. What I am seeing is three components: the cylinder head and the crank shaft housing. So, if I was to take a guess what to take off first, it would be the cylinder head. The cylinder head comes off one nut right there, one nut right there. So you got to use a long driver bit to get into that, as a T15, I think. Or you can use a flathead if you can get a flathead into there, I don't know. But once you get that head off, it's going to be stuck together, which means that gasket right there will have glue on both sides of it, top and bottom. You may need to replace that gasket with the same material. If you rip it and strip it, you can replace it with the same type of material. Okay, now this part here, this comes off same way with those 4 bolts right there. You cannot take those off first without taking this off. Those 2 bolts on those side of the cylinder head are holding these 2 together. So 1, then 2, okay? Once you get those 4 out, you can see that there's a gasket in between here. On certain blocks and cylinder heads and whatever, there is no gasket. But I can tell, just by feeling around, there is a gasket there. Okay? So, that is how you strip this down, right down to the piston, to get access to the crank. Okay? Now, the flywheel bit comes off. You gotta secure the flywheel, like hold it, and then spin this off. Once this comes off, then this can come off too. Okay? So, you know what? Because this belongs to me, I'm gonna take this off for you guys. Okay, so this is ready to come off, and the way that I did it, I used a screwdriver. I slipped it into the fins, and I held against the screw right there. And then I used this, which is an angle grinder attachment, and I used that to pull it off. But it didn't exactly work like that, so I had to use a heavy-duty screwdriver, put it on one end right there, and just whack the hell out of that until it turned. And then I used this to take it apart, but it was stuck like a hell, like a son of a bitch. But this is how it comes off. And there we go. We got the shoe attachment, so now we can look on both sides. Make sure that there is no corrosion or rust or anything, because that will damage the shoes. That will damage the clutch. Okay? Now, we can take that off, and there's a washer right there. That washer can come out. Now let's just flip it over. There we go. Washer comes out. And then what we can do is we can tap this out. So give it a tip tap on both sides. Tap, 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 tap. And then this can slip out. Okay, and because I can't do everything with one hand and hold the camera, I gotta put this on pause. Okay, so the flywheel came off. I just had to pop it out. You might have to use a jaw puller if you do. But there's a small, skinny keyway right there. And as you can tell, everything is like corroded all to hell with salt water. It's quite common in Vancouver. And there's rust. There's the keyway. And so now that there is the seal, which seals the engine, and there's no major leaks at all coming from the engine, from that seal, that I can see. So therefore, There's no leaks on that, and there's nothing on this side. There's nothing coming underneath anywhere else. We have a good engine, we have a good block, we have a good everything. And so now we're going to put this aside. This can now be all cleaned up now. We're going to leave it as it is and then clean everything on the engine. So let's look at the cutter attachment. Okay, so this was sitting into there just like that. Okay, and the blades goes back and forth somehow. So I would assume this is fixed and this moves. And it looks like it's having a hard time moving. So yeah, this might all need to be greased up, but I would say that when it comes to a part moving back and forth, it is because of this part here. Where's that gear? Okay, so that's a centered one. This one is off-centered. This pin here, I would assume, fits into this, right against this part. And because it's offset, it spins around, causing this to go back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. So that's how this works. So we're going to clean this up and re-grease it. And this part here, we're going to clean this part up too and get it to move again. So we'll have to use some rust cleaner and whatnot. This will be just the bottom plate, the cover, cleaned up, rinsed, washed, whatever. So yes, there we have it. All the parts and the pieces. Oh, the clutch. So remember, this part was in the flywheel like that. This goes into there like so, and this spins with the flywheel. And as I was telling you, these shoes expand. So they expand and they grab the inside of this clutch. Okay, so that's how that works. And yeah, you can take these out, but it's a pain in the butt to get the springs and everything back together. So we're just gonna put that there. And there's no more other components on this. So now we're going to look at this part here. So let me get everything all organized. Okay. Now we come to the part where we're going to try to understand the fuel lines. Alright, so we got two fuel lines hooked up to the primer bulb. These two hook up to the carburetor. These two hook up to the fuel tank. One is the return, one hooks up to the air filter. Now, because of the fact that the person who did this, hopefully he used fuel lines that were just a bit bigger than a hole. This should not slip out very much at all, and it does. So therefore, what that tells me is that just by looking at the general area of this here, it's greasy, it's oily, and that is gasoline. So the gas tank is behind here somewhere, built right into the handle. And this part here, I wonder if that's the same thing. Yes, it is. That's loose too. So these two lines are loose on this machine. Whoever put it together used the wrong size of fuel lines, and it was leaking on that point right there that my screwdriver's on, as well as that right there. There's gas coming out, and you can tell just by looking at it. There's oily crap all over everywhere. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get a piece of paper and draw you out everything as far as the fuel system. Be mindful that this here is part of the magneto. There's a screw right there that this comes out, so we're going to take this out, and this is in the start position. Look when I'm putting it in the stop. It's going to snap. See? Making a connection right there. Start, stop. Okay? And this part, this blade right there was connected to the magneto, which is this part. Okay, that slips off. This comes out with a screw. This part here is loose. This just holds the throttle cable into place. Okay, technically you can take that off because it's just sitting on right there. So this throttle cable can come off very easily. We'll take the throttle cable out. We'll take this cable out. And then we'll get a very good look at the fuel tank. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to replace these lines, all of them in fact, and we're going to do a water pressure test to make sure there is no leaks anywhere in the fuel tank. We have everything disconnected except those two fuel lines. Primer bulb is right here. We'll talk about that later. The gas cap came off. Sometimes there's air vents in the gas tank. Sometimes there is not. But when I looked into the gas tank where those two fuel lines are, you can sort of see them right there. And I will tell you that both lines, or that line in particular, this line here is only sticking out about 1/4 of an inch. Or this one here. So look at that. This is the return, okay? This one here is hooked up to the fuel filter. There should be something rattling around in here. And there sort of is. I can't really see in there to find the fuel filter. But if I was to push this in further, there's a possibility that if I keep pushing the line in, the fuel filter might become visible. So, I'm just going to take this out totally completely apart, and I'm going to start explaining things. Give me a minute here. Now comes the part where everybody is talking about. We have 3 fuel lines, we have a carburetor, and we have a primer bulb, and we have a gas tank. Where the hell do they all hook up? That's where this picture comes in. So put it on pause, look at this picture, and when you're ready to press play, we're going to continue. When you press the primer bulb down, pressing it down, you're effectively pushing the fuel that is inside of here out. You're pushing it out back into the fuel tank. Okay? So, when you let go of the primer bulb, when you let go of it, you're sucking air in. So, the fuel is getting sucked in from the filter, going to the carburetor. And if you keep going up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, you're pushing, sucking, pushing, sucking. Okay? Those arrows indicate the fuel flow. So, when the fuel gets into here, it will bubble up. It'll be half full or it'll be right full. Depending on the manufacturer and the seal that you have in your carburetor, it will be full or half full, depending on the fuel, how full it is, numerous factors. In order for the fuel to flow, there is an air valve. There is, I got a picture of that too. So hold on. On a fuel flow diagram, certain gas tanks have a valve in them. And on this one in particular, there is an air valve right there. I took it out. It is this little green piece. This little green piece is called a duckbill valve. Okay? And that just sits comfortably right into that hole, and you push it in, and then you put a little cover right into there. It just slips right into that notch there. It covers that duckbill valve. Okay, so what that does is right there. On any fuel tank, there is always going to need to be air to push the fuel down. It's going to be separate on the fuel tank, or it's going to be built right into the fuel cap. There's a lot of weed whackers that have the duckbill valve or air valve inlet on the fuel cap. It could be any contraption, whatever it is. You either have situation A, where it's attached to the fuel tank, or situation B, where it's attached to the fuel cap. Okay? Now, in order for the fuel tank to work efficiently, this is the part that comes down, and this is the part that comes up, where you're pushing on a 2-line fuel tank. In which case, on this one, it would be part B that we're looking at. But if it was A, then that valve would be attached to the fuel tank, as you can see right here. If you are a plumber, if you know a plumber, everyone will tell you you need the outside atmospheric air pressure to go into the fuel tank to push that through so it exits out the fuel line. Okay? So, all fuel tanks need to have an air inlet in order for the fuel to flow properly. Once you have the fuel flowing properly, then when you're pressing this up and down, this is how it goes. Okay, now, on your primer bulb, there's a long stem and a short stem. Let's look at this one. Okay, you see this? It's got a long and a short stem in it. On a short stem, you can see where it says in. That is your first indication that fuel is going in. So this is the part where it goes in. And this part attaches to the carburetor. Which side of the carburetor does it attach to? Well, I'm glad you asked that, because I got this labeled. Smaller shaft, bigger shaft. Let's look at the carburetor. Okay? So here we have the part where it attaches to the fuel filter. This attaches to the primer bulb. Certain carburetors don't attach to the primer bulb because they got a primer bulb up on top here. Okay? But this one doesn't have that, and we have this special circumstance. This shaft is smaller in diameter than this one. This is how you differentiate which connects to which. The bigger one will always connect to the fuel filter. So the bigger connects to the fuel filter. And now these holes here, this is the return, this is the fuel filter side. How will you know which one to put which? And that has a lot to do with the size of these holes. These are metric, by the way. This is 4.5, this is 4. Okay, so you can use a drill bit, a metric drill bit, and figure that out for yourself. So take a drill bit, stick it the opposite way into here, and if there's wiggle room, use a bigger drill bit. Keep putting drill bits into here until it doesn't wiggle anywhere and it's nice and snug. Do the same thing with this one. Take the reading of your drill bit and you'll figure out which hole is bigger or smaller. Okay? Sometimes they're the same size, not a big deal. But I want to show everybody something very important, which I did not draw out here. I'm going to draw it out now. Okay. Now, this situation right here. See this tank? The fuel line goes in that I draw. So, this is the housing, which the hole is right here. This is your hole. This is the hole that we were talking about. Let's say this is 4.5 in diameter. Okay, now your fuel hose that goes into here needs to be bigger. The diameter of your fuel hose, the outside diameter, needs to be 5, at least 5 millimeters. And the reason why is because the hole is here. The tube needs to squeeze into there Okay, so this is the outside component of the tubing. Okay, so when the larger diameter tube goes through that hole, it'll squeeze it so that way there's an airtight seal. There's no air getting at this point here, this point here, this point here, this point here. Okay, so larger diameter tube and a smaller hole will ensure there's a tight seal so no gas can escape through those points. Do you understand? Okay, so because of the fact that these were loose when they were coming out of that hole, that explains why it looks messy here. A messy fuel tank area, improperly placed fuel tubes will result in a catastrophe if there's a fire or there's a leak. Okay, big damages to the environment too as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to properly put in the tubing, the right size tubing, through these holes, attached to the carburetor, attached to the fuel primer bulb, according to our picture and everything that I had explained to you. One of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to do a tear down and rebuild of this carburetor, and we're going to do a drink test. We're going to do an actual test with a separate container that I have, and I'll put the fuel from here to here to the container and we'll pump it up and you'll see the fuel flow, how exactly it's supposed to look. Okay, right now what we're going to do is we're going to do a water pressure test. So we're going to plug those holes up, put the thing back onto here, and we're going to fill this up with water. We're going to put some pressure into one of those holes and see if there's any leakage anywhere right after we clean this up and degrease it. Okay, so the way that I'm going to clean this up is with a pail full of laundry soap and Comet. This gets dunked into there, gets splashed around, this gets rinsed out. This will happen to all the other components as well. And this is how things get cleaned up properly, okay? All the components have now been cleaned and washed in the soap water. The body, the flywheel, the gears, the muffler, everything is nice and clean, washed. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about the carburetor. We're going to take it apart. Before I do that, we're going to make a nice area and put this to a side. Carburetor tear down. Before we tear this down, we're going to look at it. So I think, I can't remember how, I think it's situated like this. It sits somehow on, well, anyways, the primer bulb usually tells me which way it's sitting, but in this case there is not one. But I think it's like this. I remember this is on the bottom of the housing. So here's the throttle. The throttle is right here. This face is a lot different than this face, and the fact of the matter is that you have a hole right there, which has to do with the cylinder. There's a cylinder hole, and when you look at the cylinder right here, you can see that there's a corresponding hole. That hole is very important to the hole that's on here, okay? So you cannot get that mixed up. So it goes on just like that. It goes on just like that. The holes line up, but then if you remember this part here, there's a channel, which there's a channel where this hole lines up with that hole and it brings it around to this side here. A little too much explaining. Anyways, let's take this apart. We got flathead or Phillips on this side here. We're gonna take it out. Sometimes these might be put together with glue, sometimes no. Okay, there we go. There's some green stuff in there. This looks like it's in pretty good condition. This feels a little thick for some reason. Something with this. I think there's two pieces here. Or there's one. Yeah, there's two pieces. Somebody has went and put two pieces together. I don't know why. But they did. Now, you see there's a screen right there. That is kind of, looks a little bit ugly. We can definitely take that out. And we will. We're going to work on this side now. Let's put those to one side over there. Let's put the screws over to here. Screws are tiny, they were differentiated from the other side. This comes out, ooh, just nicely. There's some more green crap in there. I'm looking at this. This looks like it's corroded all to hell, so we can take this off. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's not too bad for wear, but we'll replace it anyway, just because we happen to have the replaceable parts. Okay, and now we have the metering meter. And it doesn't look like there's anything stuck right there. But it does look messy. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to put a flat screwdriver across this to see how far from the edge that the top of the meter is. And it looks like it's just about maybe like a 32nd above the top of the flat surface here. Okay? Maybe a 32nd or whatever, but it's not touching. So therefore, when you go to replace this, it needs to look exactly like this. There are diaphragms where there's this button in the middle is like really thick. It sticks out like a nipple. But on this particular case, does sticks out about maybe a 1/16. So what we're going to do now is going to take out the screw. Alright, and we're just going to let everything fall together just like that. And this screen here, we'll take that right out. Just like that, it's there. Okay, everybody, so what we're going to do is we're going to flush out all the holes and all the ports. So we'll take a little red straw from WD-40. We'll take some WD-40. We'll spray it into this hole. We'll spray it into this hole. Spray it into there. We'll clean this all up. Spray it into that hole right there. Spray it all around. And we'll spray it on this side too. These two holes are connected. This hole here, we'll flush that out. We'll flush this out here too. And this one especially, this is where the fuel goes into, where that little needle valve is right there. We'll inspect the needle inlet, and it looks like it's fine. Again, so we'll rinse that out. We'll rinse all these parts out. And this surface here, we'll just rub it lightly with brake fluid. And And oh, you know what? We should take the jets out. So the jets, yeah, that's right. When it comes to doing the jets, you need to pay attention to which jet goes where. And that is extremely important because not all jets are the same. So let's take this one out. This one here is, okay, let me see. This one is the high. This one is the low. The high is always the one closest to, the high jet is always the one closest to the cylinder. The low jet is always the one closest to the air filter. Okay, that is always the way it is on all. Now we're going to take this out. We're not going to bother finding how far it is put in. We're just going to take it out completely. And I got the wrong freaking screwdriver. Okay, here we go. I'm just going to take it out completely and we'll compare the differences between these two. Okay, so the difference, this is the low. I got the low. Low is on the left, high is on the right. Let's take off the springs. And we're going to do a comparison. So just by looking at it, one is longer than the other. So in this case, the low jet is longer than the high jet. Do they have the same thread? No, they don't. They do not have the same thread, and are they the same diameter? Almost. You can almost say that they are similarly the same diameter, but they have different threads, and one is longer than the other. You all need to pay attention to that. You really, really need to frickin' pay attention to that, okay? Low, high, fine threads, fine. Or let's just say coarse, fine. Alright? Now, we're going to take our little red straw, and we're going to blow into there. We're going to blow into there. And then we're also going to blow into here. What happens if you find out that on your weed whacker you got two things and they look the same? Well, there's always differences, but they got the same threads, they're the same length, and they got the same heads on them. Well, what you do is just you put one in and then you put in the other. And one should go in nicely and the other should not go in nicely. In this case, you cannot make that mistake. You can just put this one in by hand and you can tell that it goes in nicely and easily. But you will get them mixed up, so make sure that you analyze them carefully before you put them in, otherwise the carburetor may not work correctly, okay? And so that's what all I'm going to do right now is just flush this out, and I'm going to replace these parts here, and I'll show you that in a bit. So right now, I'm just going to work on that. We're going to replace these parts here, and the way that we do that is I go to my arsenal. I flip up the lid. I look at the picture. Does the pictures match what I have there? They sort of do. This one here, maybe. Does that picture match? Does it? I think we got a winner. Is it? Yes? What about this one? I think so. Okay. We got a winner. So, this one here, we're just going to do is just go like that. Make sure it's not open. Yes, it's opened. Go into the other one. All the pieces. Put it right there. Put this one back. into there like that. Close the lid. And then, just like that, bada bing, we put those pieces back into the carburetor. Okay, everybody, we're going to put this together. And we're going to do it very carefully, just so you all don't screw up. So we're going to put the components in there. The brand new one. Okay, so metering needle goes into there. The axle and the hootenanny. Okay, you see how on here there's a dimple? On the other side of this is where the spring attaches to. So that will always be down. So you gotta put this in carefully. You gotta grab the needle with the forks, lift it up, drop everything in carefully, and your spring. Spring goes into that little hole. Oh, we should put the spring in first. Okay, there we go. This is delicate work. Okay, I gotta take this out. Spring goes into there, like that. Yes, 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 yes. This is turning into a boring video, watching me mess around with the carburetor. Okay, so we got that on. Now let's check the clearance. Clearance is pretty good. Okay, so you see the surface all around here. You got to make sure it's free of debris and there's no bumps or anything, which is going to cause an air pocket. In this particular case, the star side of the diaphragm goes onto here, and that goes down. Of course, you got to align the holes correctly. Once you get the holes lined up correctly, then the other part goes on. The gasket goes on top. Okay? Gasket goes on top. And then once all those holes line up like that, then you can put this part on here. 2 holes. And once you got that, you can put the screws in. The 2 tiny screws. Just snug them gently, don't tighten them yet. Now working on the other side. Once again, this surface needs to be absolutely smooth. The black part goes on. You gotta make sure that the holes line up. Just like that. See the holes line up? And do the same thing again. Something like this. Oh, why is that lining up? Why is that working? It's backwards, that's why. There we go. Gasket always goes on top of the diaphragm on the carburetor. Then you can put this part on. But you gotta put this on very carefully. Like that. There's pins in there which help it guide it in. Put the screws in. Oh, yeah, put the screws in. Close it up. Snug them nicely. Then you can put your jets in. Remember, don't get them mixed up. These ones are very distinguishable because they're one, like I said, one's fine threads and one's coarse. Clean the nibs of these nicely. Put them in there. This one goes in. Nice. Woohoo. Now, this one here, we're going to clean the threads and the nose. Put the spring. And then we're going to put it into here. And it's going to thread into there nicely. I could not get these mixed up even if I tried because the threads do not match. Now we're going to put it in all the way until it snugs. Snugs right there. Now we're going to pull it out one turn. So half one. We're going to do the same thing on the other one. Pull them both out after getting them snugged in. Okay, this one comes out one turn, half one. Now look at them. They are not equal when it comes to where they snug inside, because remember, one's longer than the other, therefore one turn out is different for both of them. Your weed whacker, or whatever model of weed whacker or brand that you have, they will be the exact same thing where they will not be the same, okay? One turn out. And now what we can do is a drinking test. Drinking test means I'm going to hook this up to a fuel line. I'm going to get the primer bulb involved and a little container of gas, and we're going to do a drinking test to see how well the fuel flows through the carburetor. So let's get that set up. Okay, so we got a carburetor hooked up to the primer bulb, and this is our gas tank. So it's hooked up exactly as our picture that we drew earlier. Okay, the long end is hooked up to the gas tank right there. So let's check this out. I gotta put this on my stand here. Hold on. Okay, so what you should see is the fuel going from one end of the tank. So I press the primer bulb, that you're going to watch me do. And when I do, you're going to watch the fuel flow. The fuel should flow through here, and you should see it coming through the tubes. Okay? And let me get my camera a little bit so you can see. Here we go. So pressing down, releasing. There we go. You can see the flow coming in. Pressing down, releasing. Down. And yes, yes, yes. It's working, it's working, it's working, yes. Okay, so you can see right on the left side of the screen, fuel is coming into the primer bulb and it's filling it up and it's spitting it out when I'm pushing down. There is no air bubbles coming into the carburetor, and there's no air bubbles leaving there. Well, there sort of is, but that's just because of the gas. Normally it's a solid flow through all of the lines, and when you have a solid flow through all three lines, that means you have a nice airtight connection everywhere. So hold on. We now know that we have good flow going through the carburetor, we have good flow going through the primer bulb, and there's no air bubbles or troubles in the lines. So we're good to go, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to put the carburetor and the primer bulb back into the engine exactly as pictured right here. Okay? Okay, so I'm using a metric drill bit, this one here, and I'm sticking it into there and to this hole here. Now, this drill bit goes nicely into this one. It also goes into this one just as nicely. And you would all think that, whoa, it must be the same size. That's not exactly true, because when you look at the flexibility of this drill bit into that hole, it's a little bit tight. But when we put it into this one, we got lots of play, lots of play. So what that means, this hole is bigger than this one by just 0.5 millimeter. Oh, and guess what size this is? 4 millimeters, right? So, when we look at this picture, we have a hole that's small or big. Which one of these two lines goes where? Well, we know that the bigger shaft of the carburetor, which we do have, which is right here. Remember how I said this one was bigger? This big tube, which fits from there, has got to fit into the bigger hole, because this line is going to be just a little bit thicker than this line right here. In fact, these two lines can be the same size, but this one's got to be bigger just because of the nozzle under there and the fact that that hole is larger than this one, okay? So this one is where our fuel filter is going to attach to. This one's going to be the return. That's it. As it just so happens to be, I have an entire arsenal of fuel tubes. When it comes time to put this part on, these two parts, these three parts, need to be put on first. Now, I normally set the gap by using receipt paper, and that sets the gap for me. Some of you professionals might use an actual gapper, but a piece of paper works for me, and I have no problems whatsoever doing that. Okay, so look at that, it works. Nothing is sticking. Once we get those on, then we can put this on carefully, just like that. There we go. And now we can screw that in with the screws that we had, which are right there. Okay? The engine is put back together. All I'm working on is this part here. Now, on this, the top part, this is the part that moves. So this is stationary. This is mobile. You have to, on this particular one, I have to tap it on this side just to get them to move. But what I want to do is I want to expose the teeth, and then I'm going to use a steel brush to clean between there, and then I'm going to make sure that nothing is stuck in there preventing your teeth from binding. And they're going to wash it and clean it so that way this is nice and loose. Right, so I got this greased up all the hell and cleaned up, that you can now do this, spin this by hand. See that? So the way that I did it, I used a steel wire brush, and I cleaned on both sides of the teeth. And then I went and greased it with this stuff here. And now it can just move as easy. I can even do it with one hand. Look at that. See that? That's how they move. Okay? We can now put this onto the machine and make sure it's greased up all the hell. That knob, which is right there, is what sticks into this hole here. Okay, the reciprocating motion of it causes it to go up and down. And if I was to take a guess how it goes onto there, I would say something like that. But those two holes need to line up with those two holes. Okay, so you got to push it and line it up right there. And those ones too, when you get the cover on. Alright? So that's how that works. But make sure you grease everything all to hell when you put it together. Now comes the time when we got to put some gas into here. And it takes 40-to-1 gas mixed. Now the owner's manual does not specify which oil to use and which gas to use, but I have both regular and 90, so I am using 90 weights, and this is the oil that I'm using. So the mix is 40-to-1, and 40-to-1 is what the manufacturers recommended on here. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. Fuel tank is full of gas. What we're going to do now is we're going to hit the primer bulb to see the fuel flow. And I don't know if you can see it through the lines, but if you can see this, then here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, look at that. On the 6th one, 7th one, it's filling up. So we have good flow. Now look at that primer bulb. Is that nice? Hey? You know what? Because of the fact that we were cleaning here, cleaning the lines and this, we're going to give it a few more presses to let the gas inside the carburetor flush out any of the impurities that we had been using to clean. Okay? So, when you see the primer bulb like this, that means no air leaks, we have a good flow, good connection, and the carburetor is drinking properly. Now we can go ahead and start it. So, gets us in a stop position, we're going to put it into the start position. Now, this is here is your choke, your start, your run. Remember when I was taking that there was a snaps on this thing when it's on the carburetor for this choke valve? This here's choke. This here's half choke, and this here is full-on run. So, choking means you're restricting the air into the cylinder. Means no air is getting through the air filter. Half choke means that the valve, the throttle valve, the butterfly valve is open just partially to let this thing warm up and start after a minute. You're supposed to let it idle for a minute on half choke when you have a half choke option on an engine. Once it warms up for a minute, then you put it into the run. So when you have it in half choke, it'll start, the revolutions per minute will be minimum. When you put it into run, the revolutions per minute will increase. It'll make more noise. Okay, so once we have it in the run, then we can hit the throttle. Okay, but what we're going to do is we're just going to start it, make sure that we can get it to start, and possibly idle in half choke. Because what I need to do after is I need to go and adjust the high jets and the low jets and the idle at a different location. And that's just because of the noise at the building that I live in. So you're going to see me start it up and try to get it to idle on half choke. So I'm going to get my phone set up. Choke. Ooh, that was pretty good. Primer bulb on half choke. Okay, so it started on choke. I'm going to hit the throttle. So as you've seen, it did start, which was a success. So what that means, if it started on choke, what I need to do is I need to adjust the jets. So I'm going to take this to a location, I'm going to adjust the jets, and we're going to play with this, and you're going to watch me do it there. Okay, so here's where I'm going to start it. You're going to see me mess around with the high jet and the low jets and the idle. Luckily, there's some garbage nearby that I can put on a piece of table, because once the engine is running, these things start to spin. So, in order to prevent that, we adjust the idle. You'll see me doing that here. Okay. All right, everybody, so that was a success in getting this totally completely rebuilt. And as you've seen, there was no smoke when I was using it, which I was expecting smoke because that's quite normal when you're starting an engine that you just rebuilt, with the oils, the gases, the greases that you use to get everything running properly, especially with what it is that I did when I took the carburetor apart, but that's fine. So let's look at this together. Let me flip my phone around. So I got it set on a white towel here, and I've had it sitting here for a while. And looking underneath, there is no leaks whatsoever. It is raining out, it has been raining out for a while, so it might look a little bit wet, but this works good. When I adjusted the idle and the low and the high jet, like you've seen, I started off with the high jet at half a turn out, low jet 3/4 of a turn out. So you got to remember that, half and 3/4. Okay, and as for this, I just adjusted this. I pushed it all the way in, and then pulled it all the way out, just to make sure that this is not spinning like this, because it's not really supposed to do that. All right, and so you see me adjusting this. There's no smoke anywhere coming out of anything, and there's no leaks. There's still no leaks on this. Nothing was shaking badly, and I was very surprised by the noise of this thing. As you heard in the video, this thing is not really loud. And so, in order for you to adjust the carburetor, you need the correct mix of gasoline. The fuel filter in there needs to be clean. The air filter needs to be absolutely clean. And the fuel system needs to be running correctly. No air leaks whatsoever. You will get a successful adjustment on this by doing exactly what it is that you just seen that I did. And so therefore, let's look at this thing, because everything is spotless on this now. Washed, cleaned, rinsed. There's no leaks. All the screws are tight on this. The blade hasn't been sharpened, but it has been freed up from its old position. The spark plug, when I started it, it was the original spark plug that my neighbor gave it to me in. And now we know that the on-off switch works too when I shut it off. So, yes, we know that the throttle works exactly like I cleaned it and meant it to be. Everything is adjusted accordingly. And there is no air leaks in the carburetor when it was put together. All the gaskets are cleaned and fresh. And the muffler, I didn't see anything coming out of the muffler. No smoke, no nothing. In fact, this was pretty good. So if you don't mind me saying, everybody, this is a success. And that will be the end of this video. If you have any questions as to what it is that you've seen me do in the video, I will answer them. In fact, I will even make another special video with whatever it is that you're talking about, and I'll tag you in it. The date today is Friday, October 4th, I think, for 4th or 3rd or something. I don't know, but it's about 1 o'clock p.m. 2024. My name is Sean P. Carlson of Blackjack 98 Enterprises. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one. Have a good day.